Hey everyone, and welcome to Campus Pulse, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater College of Business and Economics. I'm Jessica Berge, and this is where we shine a light on the people and ideas that make CoBE tick. Every episode, we're sitting down with the faculty, staff, and innovators who are doing the real work. The research projects you've never heard about, the new programs being built, the teaching experiments happening right now. Whether you're a student, part of our CoBE family, or just curious about what really goes on inside of a business college, this show is for you. So let's dive in. On today's episode of Campus Pulse, there's someone I knew I needed to talk to. He's been part of the Warhawk family for nearly 25 years and has worn just about every hat you can on this campus. Professor, business owner, mentor, scholar, and currently chair of the UW-Whitewater Faculty Senate. Dr. Russ Kashian is a professor of economics and the co-founder and director of our Fiscal and Economic Research Center, FERC. Over his time here, he's guided hundreds of students, secured grants, and become one of those people that when you say his name, everyone knows exactly who you're talking about. So, for today's conversation, I sit down with Russ and talk about what's driving his career at CoBE, what the FERC does, and what he's learned from 25 years of watching students figure out their path. Let's dive in. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you.
So my first question for you is, can you tell me what exactly is the FERC for someone who's never heard of it and what you do there?
The FERC is a research center focused on nonprofits, communities, and industry, in which we, at our best, try to put dollar signs on things you couldn't value. The process by which we do this is entirely student work, and it's driven by models that we co-develop between the students and the faculty. Over the years, one could say that, Russ Kashian is director of the FERC. That's accurate in a sense. Many faculty have helped over the years. It was started by Mark Skidmore and Mark Eisworth, who subsequently left. Matt Winden is a great contributor, has been, will be in the future. Chotan Basu. And so what happens is we develop models. The students collect the data. The students basically implement the models. And then at the end of the day, we analyze and we verify those models. And so probably our first project was putting a value on Lake Delavan subsequent to the cleanup. So what we wanted to know was, how did the property values increase given the positive efforts to clean the lake? One of our second projects was we looked at the value of the Walworth County Fair to the local economy. These may seem totally different. One's about a lake, the other one's about a fair, one's about people buying pulled pork sandwiches, the other one's about the property values given the demand for housing. But at the end of the day, it's all about economics, dollars, and numbers. And partially smiley faces and happiness of the public. Our third biggest project was the impact of the foreclosure crisis in around 2008, 2009, and the impact it had on families and property values. So you start there, and then you morph into things like, how do brownfield developments impact property values and tax revenues? How do basically, so you have land there. How does the expansion of broadband in northern Wisconsin create a more vibrant economy? So these seem like they're all over the place. You got broadband, you got brownfields, you got county fairs. But at the end of the day, it all swings back to, how does it affect the economy? And internalized in that is, how does it affect families and people?
It's very interesting. I can definitely see how that would impact the community and obviously the people that are hiring you to do this work. When students are getting involved in this, do they know what they're doing? Do they know what the FERC is? Or is this part of the process?
The process, and by the way, let's keep in mind that the students get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So the communities, the organizations, they ultimately pay the university, who then pays the students. the students, the first level of training they get is to do a literature review, to basically to look at the history of the literature on, say, tax increment financing. From there, they can review all of the models that have been built over the years. Now they've read the literature, peer-reviewed academic literature tends to be. Then they look at the models that are internalized in these papers. From there, they can identify the data they would need to build the model. And so it starts with the history. Then it goes to the model. Then it goes to the data needed to execute the model. Then the results. And sometimes the results surprise you. You don't see it coming. Because we try not to go in with a preconceived notion. It's very hard not to. But at the end of the day, we want to know what ultimately happened. And at that point, the student then writes the conclusion. And I'll give you an example. I serve on one of the committees in the city of Muskego, Wisconsin. And a number of years ago, we took a rail corridor and turned it into a bike path. There was some objection, some consternation for the people who lived on either side of that bike path into the effect it would have on the property values. Because now, in effect, you have people riding a bike through your backyard. Mm-hmm. I could see the point. I mean, do I want people riding through my backyard on a bicycle? Maybe not. And so one day we sat down and we said, let's examine this. So we collected all of the sales prices of houses on the bike path before the bike path, just a little bit of ways before the bike path, just a little bit further away. And then after we said, okay, now the bike path's built. Now let's go with the sales prices. We did what's called hedonic analysis. We controlled for how many bedrooms were in the house, how many bathrooms, how many square feet, how old the house is, all of these variables that would take what are like a series of totally dissimilar houses and try to make them control for those dissimilarities. And ran a regression, which is what the literature tells us to do, and said, okay, the only variable that matters is before the bike path and after the bike path, and found that the building of the bike path resulted in the appreciation of the properties by 9%.
Appreciation or depreciation?
Appreciation, mm-hmm. Which, by mm-hmm. the way, I appreciate the question because that was the first question I asked the student who did the work. Mm-hmm. I said, appreciation? I thought it was depreciation. No, Russ, it's appreciation. And I said, I can't believe that. Who wants to live next to a bike path? Let's get in the car. We're going to go over and look at this. Got mm-hmm. in the car, drove to Muskego, drove down the street, went to the house that had just sold, new owners. We're going to interview them. We're going to say, why would you... Oh, look to the left on the front porch, there's a bike. Uh-oh. Went to the next house. Just sold. Bike. Went to the next house. Bike. It's bike aficionados. They're like, I want to live next to a bike path. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it became apparent that our preconceived notions, while possibly valid in my heart, were just valid to me as a non-bicyclist. And so that was one of the most valuable studies we ever did, because communities, we published it in a peer-reviewed journal, and communities basically looked at it and said, this is the value of a bike path. We can aggregate the appreciation that existed because of this. We can multiply that times the tax rates and say, this is the additional tax revenue we now got because of this bike path. So it's not simply a good for the community, it's a good for the homeowner, and it's a good for the tax base. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was surprising yet fun. And when the student went to interview for the job, somewhere. They sat down, and I remember the company. I won't say the company. They said, "Well, what's this paper?" And the person interviewing him said, "I love to bike," and it was like, "Bing, got the job."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That closed the deal because it humanized the data and it humanized the hypothesis. And my student walked out with a job because they had a tangible story that was valid, but it really reached into humanity. So it was fun.
Well, and it's not only do they have some published work then, and they had a great story for the interviewer and they were able to make that connection, it's learning that happened outside of the classroom, right? It's taking their economics theory that they're learning in class and actually applying it. And I think that's really interesting. You want to tell me a little bit more about kind of how that works for the students, how they get involved with you, or like what their arc is from the beginning to their end of time at the FERC?
The arc is well, the way they get in touch with us is word of mouth that we're
Mm-hmm.
here. But then the availability of jobs comes on handshake because it's open to everyone. I mean, a good third of the workers are from letters and science. Um, a portion are then from arts. A portion are from education, and obviously more than half are probably from CoBE
Mm-hmm.
because of just the structure of the university. Um, but I need writers. I need creativity. I need artists. I need mathematicians. You need people with vision. And so the students reach out, I reach out, and then the process is, as I said, the first thing that they learn to do is how to do the preliminary research into the history of bike paths. You know, and then how does a hedonic analysis, how does a hedonic model, how is that structured? Starting 1968 with Rosen. Then they basically go forward and read the articles that cited Rosen. Then they have to learn how to collect data. How do you collect it using AI, writing code, scraping, or how do you get it by standing at a county fair and interviewing people? There's primary data, there's secondary data. Then how do you analyze the data? And you analyze the data going back to the historic models. And then how do you basically stop and say, this doesn't smell right. I don't know about this. And that's the human element. Because maybe you missed something. Maybe there was a variable in there that you didn't see coming. And we're not ultimately machines. And we have to put our humanity in there. And one of the more interesting ones was we did a study a number of years ago on poverty when the student accidentally inverted the equation, and the results came out that basically wealthy people were all getting food stamps. And they stopped and they said, wait a minute. And they culled through the data and they found where in that equation it was wrong. Where was the glitch in the code? And this is one of the challenges of technology. If you just let technology overwhelm you and there's an error, the humanity isn't there to say, I don't know if this is right. And I'm not sure if this is the accurate depiction of the story that we're doing, because there's something going on in the data, or there's something going on in the model, or there's something going on in the literature. So at the end of the day, you have to step back and say, where is the creativity? Where's the leadership? Where's the ethics? And that's the FERC. You do all these things, but at the end of the day, your name's on the product.
Mm-hmm.
And you better be darn proud of that product.
So tell me about that product. Tell me about the clients. What do they say about this process? What are they getting out of it?
They're getting in the best case, they're getting a product that they can bring back to their stakeholders. and explain the value of what they do. I'll give you, I mean, I love the examples. I think the world is better if you have tangible examples. A couple of years ago, Chotan Basu and I and a student, we looked at hotel room taxes in the state of Wisconsin. So hotel room taxes can be as much as 8 or 10%. But a lot of communities are at 5%, 6%. Now, this money is supposed to be spent on tourism attraction, and a portion can be used on other things. And what we are interested in is if cities raise their taxes from, say, 5% to 6% or 7%, would that reduce the amount of hotel revenue? Will this work its way back to hotel revenue? And so we got all the data from the Department of Revenue, looked at municipalities and cities and towns and villages, and said their tax rate in 2018 was 5%, and 2019 was 6%. And in 2020, we had COVID, so we have to control for that. And we said, when this happens, what happens to hotel revenues? And collected the data, controlled for whether it was a city, a town, a village, controlled for the population, was it rural or urban, and found that it was inelastic. What does that mean? The tax rate does not affect the amount of hotel revenue brought in. Are people going to reasonably say on a $100 a night room, an extra 1% or $1 is going to drive my decision of whether I'm going to go to Algoma, Wisconsin? Maybe it's $200. Maybe it's $4. I found it doesn't. What happens is that communities across the state took the study and said, we have an opportunity here to reinvest in our tourism infrastructure, building paths, putting in lamp posts, doing things to help the tourism industry in our community. And we have verifiable and basically peer-reviewed evidence that it is not going to harm the hotel owner. In fact, it's going to help them because we're going to get additional monies to market our community out externally to come there. And so the positive is to the community, and it actually was to the hospitality industry, and then to the restaurant industry and the tourism industry as a whole. So, and by the way, the student who did the work,
Right.
who then went out and interviewed in the hospitality industry.
It's fascinating. It really helps me to understand. I'm a marketing person. I'm not an economics scholar by any stretch of the imagination. It really helps me to see how it can be applied and what some of the bigger questions are and how much it's really like integral to our world. I can see the application of most of these that you've mentioned.
And
Actually, all of these.
And I'll give you an example with that report. We wrote, well, the bicycle report is probably, we write about 8-page paper, citations, all of the ingredients of a peer-reviewed article in an economics journal. That's basically introduction, literature review, model, data, conclusion, citations, the classic paper. We take that and we work with a student who is an English major, a professional writing major, an art major, and have them prepare a glossy brochure that is somewhere between 4 and 8 pages, maybe 12 pages at the most, so that policymakers have a rigorous article, but then they have something they can read. They can rely on the rigorous article, but we cut it up, put it together in a presentation that communicates to everyone and it's not limited to people sitting in libraries reading journals. And so this is and the value is twofold for me. One is it is truly read by policymakers. And two, the students have an opportunity to show their wares, and they have a portfolio at the end of the product that their creativity creates. And it's wonderful. They come away with a box full of product, all different, that shows that they're able to take complex subjects and tell them in a fashion that communicates with everyone, not just economics professors.
Digestible information, usable information.
It is.
Wonderful. Yeah. I love that. I've seen the work that your office produces, and it is it's engaging, it's attractive, it's very well done.
I will say this, and we go back to the students. We just finished a product and we number them. And the one we finished it always ends with the same thing. It's a V22, version 22. It's painful. And then at the end, we celebrate by looking at version 3 and going, wow, these are cave drawings from prehistoric France. That's where we start. And by the way, the cave drawings from prehistoric France are valuable. They teach you a lot.
Right. Excellent. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So if someone were to say, this sounds like a really great opportunity, this is something they're interested in doing, how do they do that? How would a student or a business learn more?
Hunt me down. I'm on campus 5 days a week, maybe 6. And I'm constantly on the move. I keep my cell phone in my pocket and I walk about 8,000 paces a day because I'm constantly moving. It's probably not the best strategy, but it keeps my legs healthy.
There you go. So then is that part of your secret? You've been here for, is it 25 years?
27.
27 years. Can you tell me what keeps you coming back every day?
The students. 100%. Honestly, I was a first generation college student. Neither of my parents graduated high school. Went to Madison in the 1970s. I found that the key to college is being part of something bigger than yourself. Whether that be a club like the AMA, a group like DECA, the poli-sci groups, the geography, geospatial lab, all of these organizations, fraternities, sororities, sports teams, clubs. You need to be part of something bigger than yourself, so that when you want to identify with something, you have that. I didn't have that. I worked. The bigger thing for me was work. When I came back into academics in my 40s, you can do the math, by the way.
I won't, I promise.
I said, I want to create something that creates a sense of place for the students, that number one, that they can grow together, and then they can give back to the community, and they can recognize, and it's not simply the community. It could be businesses. It's all about the community. But that they're part of a team. And at the end of the day, that's why I'm here, because I truly enjoy that. I mean, I was inspired by when I got my master's degree in urban studies. Professor Ned Hill inspired me to keep going in academics. I then went and got my PhD in economics, and those professors inspired me. I came here, and we had professors like John Dominguez and Jerry Laurent who inspired me further. And they all inspired me to continue to give back to the students, because it comes back. It gives back to you. This isn't a transactional experience. You can't say, well, I'm going to give them this and I'm going to get this back. But ultimately it is. You just can't. Service isn't like a soda machine. I don't put, today $2 in quarters in
Mm-hmm.
and get a soda. Sometimes I put $2 in quarters in and someone else gets a soda. But if we continue to put the $2 in, eventually I'll get a soda. So I'm not looking for that instantaneous return, because I know that in life it will be there. And I don't mean to get philosophical about it, but I think it's very important that if we put it in, it will come out. And by the way, it may not even come out during your work time. It may come out 20 years later, like it did for Sarah Atish, who was my undergraduate language professor, who, when I went to interview here, I called her for advice. This is basically almost 20 years after I had her. I called Sarah and I asked her some, and by the way, later she helped one of our faculty member write a paper 25 years after I had her for a class. So her investment in me came back to pay almost 2 generations later. And we have to recognize that.
It's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing. It really does give the meaning to the mission, why we're all here, what we're really doing in this building. So thank you very much for sharing. I do appreciate that. Going to the topic of the FERC, that's what we were here to talk about. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should, that you want people to know about what you're doing here?
I think it's a matter of trust and encouragement. The people we work with, at the end of the day, they also take ownership in the success of the students.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a number of them at the end basically positively, not brag in a negative way, but brag about how they positively contributed to the growth of the UW-Whitewater graduates.
Right.
And so the door swings both ways.
Absolutely. And I know from talking to you outside of this conversation, I know that students are being placed as interns. They're being hired on later. They're doing consulting work. They're contacting you years after they've been with you. So I do know that what you're saying right now is an accurate reflection of all of the commitment that you're putting in, the time you're putting in with them now.
100%.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's really all the questions I had for you today. I think people have a better understanding of what's going on in the Fiscal and Economic Research Center. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Dr. Kashian, and I appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss out on what we're uncovering next. And if someone you know would love hearing about CoBE, make sure to send this podcast their way. Campus Pulse is part of the Warhawk Business Voices podcast network. You can find all of our shows and transcripts at uww.edu/CoBE/podcasts. I'm Jessica Berge, and I'll see you next time.